Coriolis or anything. You
What do
can't
you
have your
mean? Anything
Coriolis
on the
then.
Earth, bro, anything on the Earth is from the same reference frame. If I jump up right now, the Earth isn't going to rotate underneath me. That's not how it works.
Yeah, so
Well,
if you
that's how
jumped up,
Coriolis works. That's how
you only
Coriolis
had the
works.
conserved momentum. You only had the conserved momentum from being on the Earth from where you jumped up.
No,
But if
the
you slowly
atmosphere is
move toward
going
the
with it.
equator, you have to be moving faster. You need a force to actually explain that, not just a concept.
A force to explain the
Um,
atmosphere going with it?
Well, the atmosphere would be like the air pushing the plane. If the atmosphere is pushing the plane, that's air, and it'd have to be a wind because the only thing that
No,
moves the
you got
plane, if
your
air
what
moves the plane, it's technically a wind.
no, your problem is you're trying to separate the atmosphere from the Earth. I don't get why you're only asking for a force for the atmosphere when your initial point is already that the Earth is rotating.
Yeah,
So
but
wouldn't
see,
you have
the winds are in the atmosphere, and winds go in all directions, right?
no, wind is the difference. The atmosphere is already in the same reference frame as the Earth's rotation. So any
Right,
difference from that is wind.
right. So when it's no air, when there's no wind, right, that's when it's in sync, right? So then you'd have to believe that the plane that goes from 500 mile per hour conserved momentum to 1,000 is being accelerated from the no wind.
No. You're confusing the plane's. Okay, the plane's speed
Well,
is a separate. That's additional speed to the reference frame of the Earth's rotation
I
already.
agree. So it's two vectors. We got the eastward tangential velocity vector, which is what the plane would have to be in sync with when it gets to the equator. It only had 500 mile per hour conserved momentum. Then it needs 1,000, so it needs to be moving twice as fast eastward in that
Wait,
vector,
why does it need that
regardless of
speed?
forward motion. Regardless of its forward motion at 400 miles an hour, say it's going west southwest, mostly west, right? But it's slightly south, and it reach the equator. Now it needs to be going backwards and sideways at 1,000 miles an hour because it only had 500 miles per hour conserved momentum from being on the Earth. Now it
No,
needs to be moving backwards and sideways regardless of its forward motion.
you're starting your reference point from the wrong speed. When you're saying it needs to conserve 500 or 1,000 to be in sync, from our perspective, from this reference point, that would just be 0 miles per hour because it's moving in sync. If something's sitting on the Earth, we're not counting it at 500 or 1,000 because the Earth's spinning that fast. We just call it 0.
Yeah, it's just that I put the GIF. You're a little bit new to the conversation. We've been going for this for hours. The GIF kind of explains it, even though the spin of the Earth is exaggerated. It would need to increase its tangential velocity to treat the Earth as stationary at the equator twice as much. Even if it's incremental, you have to name the actual force that actually does that, not the pilot being aware of it. And it'd
The
be a separate
force
vector from its forward motion.
I thought I said the force is the thrust that the plane has. It's a mechanical force. I don't get why you guys are trying to use the atmosphere for the force.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. That's not. But if you're
Yeah, it
saying it's
makes
the
no
plane,
sense.
then it's the actual pilot doing it consciously, and if there's no force, you just headed south. You can land it as stationary. So
Yeah, the
if there's
force is
thrust of the
thrust.
plane, you're saying that the thrust of the plane, if it's going west southwest, you're saying the engines of the plane are making it go twice as fast backwards and sideways.
Twice as fast? No, it doesn't have to go twice as fast. It already has the inertia from it's already in the reference frame of the Earth's rotation. So it's
No, it's not.
maintaining that. What do you
No,
mean?
it's 500. It had 500 miles per hour conserved momentum from being on the ground. Like when you jump up, you're retaining the conserved momentum from being on the ground. But if you went to the equator in a plane, you only have the 500 miles per hour from where you took off from. By the time you get to the equator, you're going to treat the runway that you're landing on as stationary, but it's moving 1,000 miles an hour. Where do you get the extra 500?
Again, you guys are counting. Okay,
Matt,
when you say 500 miles, either between 500 to 1,000 miles per hour, you guys are conflating the speed of the Earth and its atmosphere with the speed of what the plane's doing because they're not from the same reference frame. Okay, so when you're saying 500 or 1,000 miles per hour, what you're really saying is if I'm on the ground or in the atmosphere above that point, that vector point, that's just 0 miles per hour.
Right, at the 500. But then when it goes to 1,000, it's no longer zero because the conserved momentum comes from being on the ground. So if it goes to a new spot where the Earth is now spinning 1,000 miles an hour separately from the plane, because it's in a separate reference frame. We have inertial and non-inertial reference frame. So it's not in the same reference frame any longer. It would need to be account for that 500 mile per hour increase in tangential velocity directly eastward, regardless of its forward motion.
Yeah, the spin of the atmosphere that's going along with the Earth is what's keeping it at the same rate. I don't.
Now you're saying the atmosphere is pushing the plane.
So now we have this problem again. So is the atmosphere pushing the plane in a specified direction?
Wait, no, it's inertia, guys. It's momentum. There's not a force that's keeping it equated to the atmosphere.
But here's the difference, though. You have a different inertia at different points on the Earth. Would you agree?
We have a what? I'm sorry.
You would have different inertia. So if you're at a spot on the Earth that's rotating at a slower rate than another spot, your inertia would not be the same. This is why we see the Coriolis effect, right? If something is maintaining its tangential velocity at one point on a circular motion, as you get further out from the center of rotation, it is not going to have the same conserved motion as if it took off from the outer edge of that circle.
I agree with you, but when you start getting into the like how we dictate what speed is, okay, you need to take into effect distance. So our reference frame would be looking at the Earth. So yes,
taking all of that into account.
I don't see how you are, because just because I get further out from the Earth, if my speed is based on distance over that Earth.
It's not about getting further out. It's about getting further out from the alleged center of rotation. Because the alleged center of rotation would be North Pole, South Pole, line between the two of those. That would be your center axis of rotation. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree.
So if we're moving further away from that center point of rotation, we don't have the same inertia as we did if we were already on the outside of that. It's a different inertia. So you can't just say, well, it's just net zero because we're looking at the Earth as a whole object. So therefore, none of these forces apply, because they would apply, because if you're if it's a conservation of momentum, in the same way that you can jump up and down on a cruise ship and you're going to fall in the same spot, right? If that same conservation of momentum acts true, then there is a different velocity further away, so it wouldn't be the exact same inertia as you move towards another point on the surface of the Earth that is technically traveling at a higher velocity. So where do you gain that extra 500 like Dave is talking about that you would need to technically match the runway's movement?
Okay.
Let's just think north to south. You're flying from the north to the south, or you're flying south-southwest like Dave likes to do often, and your runway is facing north-south. It's relevant physically in physics.
Have you ever been on a carousel?
Can you stick to what we're actually talking about?
Okay, I'm trying to use an equivalent, because, if I'm standing at the center of a carousel and I want to get out to the outer edge, I don't need to. The inertia, you're acting as if I need to apply an extra amount of speed to get to that outer edge, because the outer edge is moving that much faster than the center.
Well, here's the thing. Let's take your carousel. You're in the middle of your carousel and you're staring at one specific horse on the edge of that carousel. Yes, if you're walking across the surface of that carousel, you could walk directly towards that horse and grab that horse, straight line path. Perfectly fine. Now, if you wanted to jump out towards that horse, you would miss it. You'd have to actually aim just a little bit ahead of where that horse is going to catch up to meet you. Would you agree?
If I jump out towards the horse?
Towards the horse, yes. If you walk on the surface, yes, you're just going to walk. The friction that is being applied by the surface as it's moving is going to be applied to your feet as they hit the ground, and you can walk a straight line path out to the edge of that carousel and touch the blue horse. Now, if you're looking at that same blue horse and you want to grab it, but by jumping, you would have to aim slightly ahead of where that is going to be in the time in which it takes you to get from the center of rotation towards the outside of the rotation. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on the surface of the Earth and we're traveling 500 miles per hour. Let's just put it at that. There is another portion of the surface of the Earth that, in relation to the center of rotation, is moving 1,000 miles per hour. We're leaving that surface and we're traveling to that outer portion. Do you understand the analogy now?
Yes.
So where we would either have to lead that target considerably, right? And even then, we would have a hard time landing because we only have the conservation of that relative to the center 500 mile per hour rotation. That's all that we're conserving when we leave the surface. Once we leave the surface, we're no longer just going to conserve that, so when we leave the surface, we're going to conserve that, but if we're going to a further portion that's traveling at a higher velocity, because the outer edge of the carousel is traveling at a higher velocity than the inner edge, we would have to compensate for that. Would you agree?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what Dave's talking about when he's talking about the plane taking off from a portion of the Earth that has a relative tangential velocity of 500 miles per hour, and it conserves that, and it's traveling towards the equator, which has a tangential velocity of 1,000 miles per hour. Where does it acquire that extra 500 miles per hour in order to safely land with the surface that is technically traveling faster than the surface that he originally left?
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Nothing like blue horses to explain things. Well, the answer is you can't. The Earth isn't moving. Pilots don't need to adjust for it. Welcome to Flat Earth.
You mean that the pilots treated it as stationary because it's stationary? No.
Didn't Left Lane just come in and say that all that stuff is inconsequential? Meaning he doesn't even need to worry about it.
It's 15 degrees or something. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you want to use the carousel, just set the carousel rotating once every 24 hours and see how much you got to lead it.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll make the edge of the carousel from the center of rotation. We'll make that 5,000 miles, and it's still going to be applicable, even though it's only moving at one rotation per day, 15 degrees per hour. Out at the exterior, if that is a large clock, that the arm of the clock is 5,000 miles long, and it only takes 24 hours for it to rotate. If I'm standing on the face of that clock and I'm really close to the center, I could easily jump over that. If I walk all the way out to the outer edge of that clock, 5,000 miles away, that arm is going to be coming so fast it would cut me in half before I even knew what hit me.
Yeah, the whole its speed.
No, that's not equivalent.
It's twice as slow as the hour hand if it's the size of a clock. But if the clock were as big as the circumference of Earth, the tip of that hour hand is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. Doesn't make it any slower because you think of it as slower. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but you're not considering the air though. You're in the clock. You're not considering atmosphere moving with it. It's a separate deal.
Yeah, but I'm just giving you an idea that the outer edge of that clock arm is moving at a faster rate over a specified surface area over time than the middle. It covers more ground. There's more pepperonis you can put closer to the crust.
Yeah, the tangential velocity is just a consequence of the radius, though. It's it's still the same rate of rotation. You know, it's all any point
Yeah.
on that sphere, it's all the same. You know.
So next time I order a pizza, I'm going to say, hey, the amount of pepperonis you put around the crust, I want those to be in the center too.
And that's
'Cause
not
it's
equivalent.
all the same. It's all the same, bro. It's the same amount of degrees at the center as it is the outside. Should be the same amount of pepperonis, right?
I think if you were able to put like something like the sun on the edge of that clock hand, I think you could jump over it, dude. You'd see it coming.